Kelsey is there.
Okay, perfect. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the sub-task force for the Colorado River Drought Task Force. I guess first we will start with introductions of everyone in the room so that everyone on Zoom can hear us and know who is here. First, I am Lisa Yellow Eagle. I am the tribal water attorney for Southern Ute Indian Tribe and am appointed to both the sub-task force and the drought task force.
Hello, I'm Letitia Yazzie, the Water Resource Director for the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe, also on the Sub-Task Force and Main Task Force.
Perfect. And I am Becky Mitchell, Colorado's Commissioner to the Upper Colorado River Commission. I am only on this task force and I appreciate everybody being here.
Yeah.
It's nice to be here in person.
Good morning. I'm Steve Wolf. I'm General Manager for Southwestern Water Conservation District, and I serve both on the full task force and tribal sub-task force.
Hi everyone, I'm Monica Rock. I am the programs coordinator for Southwestern. I am not on any task force, but I'm helping run the Zoom today.
Good morning, I'm Peter Ortego, General Counsel, Ute Mountain Ute Tribe. I'm just hanging out.
And I'm Celine Hawkins. I'm a program director for the Nature Conservancy. I'm thrilled to serve on the sub-task force. I am just an alternate on the main task force.
Great, thank you very much. I would like to invite one of our facilitators, Kelsey McElroy, to join by Zoom, and we have asked her to provide information to the sub-task force about the open meetings law and what the sub-task force needs to remember about that. And also we'd like to ask her to provide information on what the facilitators can offer to the sub-task force.
Good morning, everyone. And I'm so sorry. I tried to start my video, but it tells me that I'm not allowed to. So if you're okay just hearing me, then I will just keep talking.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here. So first, I can just provide an overview of the services that we are able to provide you so that you all can decide in what capacity to best use our support. The funding for the facilitators comes through the state of Colorado legislature through the appropriations for Senate Bill 295. And in terms of what that actually means for you all, we are able to, so we are contracted through our company, the Langdon Group, and I am the project manager within the Langdon Group. And then Siobhan Locke is our lead facilitator, and then Jordan Brock is the support staff. We also have several other people providing support, both in terms of website and Zoom setup and support, and also streaming to YouTube of meetings. So specifically in terms of facilitation, we are able to set up Zoom webinar, enabling public access to the meetings. Again, you already have that, so you probably don't need that. But one thing that we could do in the future is set up we have a YouTube channel for the task force. And so we could also live stream the meetings. It seems like that might not be necessary, but it's up to you all again. And then we also are, for the main task force, issuing public notice of the meeting, as well as the agenda. And so that could be as simple as you all sending us the agenda that you have set for your next meeting and we post it to the website, or helping to facilitate the creation of that agenda. Again, that's up to you. Public notice, as far as we understand it from the State Office of Legislative Legal Services, needs to occur at a reasonable time period before the meeting. There is not a specific time amount that we have been given. So in general, we have been trying to operate with issuing that public notice minimum, with the first meetings that got going, that time period was very short. And so we had we're trying to do it within 24 hours, but really if we can at least set that a minimum of a week ahead of time, that's really what we are aiming for in terms of public notice for the meeting. 2 weeks out is much more ideal for public notice of meeting. So that's, again, what we're aiming for with the main task force meetings. In terms of putting out the agenda, we try to put out draft agenda 1 week prior to the meeting and then update that to a final agenda at least 48 hours prior to the meeting time and date. So we can do any support that you all would like there. All of that will go onto the crdroughttaskforce.com website, which is being pretty much continually updated by our website support team. And then in terms of within the meeting, we can provide note-taking so that you all can concentrate on your conversation. We can do the meeting minutes for you, give them back to you turn them back around within a few days to you all so you can review them and then have them to approve for your next meeting. And then we will upload those to the website as well so they're available for the public. One of the other things that we were made aware of is that it can be very helpful to record the meetings so that they can go along with the meeting minutes. And then we can post those recordings on the website as well. And so that's one of the benefits of also streaming on YouTube is that automatically makes that available for any members of the public who missed the meeting to watch it again later on. And then in terms of facilitation, we can provide facilitation for any discussion within your meetings. If that is something desired, that can be something as simple as just being present to take notes on a whiteboard so that you all can keep kind of track of items of discussion or topic, to even a more active role of leading the conversation. So again, that's up to your discretion, what would actually be most useful to you. And again, if something as simple as note-taking in the background or even just helping facilitate the meeting happening. Again, I think the last thing in terms of what services we can provide are arranging meeting times, dates, and if desired locations. I really appreciate how I didn't have to do that for this, but I'm happy to do that, and we are paid to do that. So you just need to let us know what you all would like. So that's the list of services we can provide. I can pause there to answer any questions that you may have or clarification you need.
Anyone?
I have a question, but it's not for Kelsey.
Go ahead.
I was wondering from either of the tribal nations, if there's any other considerations on how you'd like the information made available to your membership that we should consider in thinking about what Kelsey just told us was available for services.
I mean, I think that I can work with what Kelsey and the facilitators can make available and then make sure that the membership knows that what the website is and possibly share the minutes through our system internally.
Thanks.
Yeah, what we already have available, I think is sufficient enough.
All right. Well, are there other questions or for me that I can answer, or would you like me to move on to the open meetings portion?
The open meetings.
Okay, awesome. So I want to start with the caveat that I am not a lawyer. I am a facilitator. And so my knowledge of open meeting laws is based on conversation with Megan McCall at the Office of Legislative Legal Services. So if you do have questions, what I will tell you right now is that I will answer them to the best of my abilities based on my knowledge, but most likely I will turn around and send an email to Megan and CC you all so that we can get the exact wording and clarification that we need if you do have questions. So my understanding is that the Office of Legislative Legal Services has determined that even though the task force and the subtask force are not able to make legislative decisions or approval of decisions, because they are making recommendations, they have decided that they are going to treat both of the subtask force and the main task force as subject to open meeting laws. And what this means is, in practicality, that anytime 2 or more members of the group are gathered, it is considered a public meeting. So that just means that you are not able to prevent someone from being part of a conversation. And if someone requests to be part of your conversation, then you cannot deny them access to that. And that's probably the biggest change to just your daily operations, is that if you are speaking to another member of this group and someone else wants to be present, you cannot deny them the ability to be present for that. That being said, and this is again part, I can get clarification on this, but you do not need to issue a public notice if two of you are gathered. And also there's the caveat that if you run into each other through just your daily operations work and are not necessarily talking about the issues that the subtask force is addressing, then that does not qualify as part of open meeting laws. The public notice for a meeting must be issued when there will be a quorum or over half, so 3 people, so just 1 up from 2, gathered. Those are kind of the 2 biggest things that I took away from that meeting. Otherwise, you're required to provide detailed meeting minutes. And again, a recording and posting a recording can really help along with the meeting minutes to go along with it for access to the public. And a lot of this is just to make sure that all decisions and conversations are done within the context of making sure that the public is able to easily access the ways that the groups go about discussing these items so that they can provide contributions if needed. There's also some not concerns, but just issues with CORA, or the Colorado Open Records Act. And again, my understanding, and I can get more clarification if needed, that just documents that are passed around amongst the group are also subject to open records. And therefore, as facilitators, one of the things that we can do is any documents that the group is looking at or working with, we can make sure they are posted to the website so that the public is also able to view them in a timely manner. That's my brief presentation on open meetings laws. Any questions you have, I'm happy to either try to field or start that email to Megan to get clarification on.
Any questions?
Thanks, Kelsey.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, not a problem.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. So we'll move on to the next agenda item. Actually, I just noticed that I flipped the 2 agenda items. I thought maybe we should set up the meeting schedule before we jump into substantive discussions. Would that be all right with everyone?
Yes.
Okay, and that way we're not moving from beginning a substantive conversation and then switching to a process. So setting up the meeting schedule and locations for the subtask force for the next few months. There was a suggestion that we meet twice a month as the Drought Task Force is meeting, same week, but on Tuesdays. And I don't know, does anyone else have any other suggestions, or what do you think about that suggestion?
Could we get the exact Tuesdays just so I can double check?
Yeah.
Yeah. Not October 3rd.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. So,
The next one would be the 26th.
mhm.
I will be gone that time. I think you will as well.
Okay,
Same, so that.
So,
okay. So maybe we just walk through our calendars.
Yep.
And find some dates then. Sounds like the rest of September is out for now.
Yes.
Okay. And then that first week of October, that Monday and Tuesday is out for me, October 2nd and 3rd, because I'll be down in Phoenix. So maybe the 10th.
that works fine for me.
10th works for me. It may have to be virtual, but
Okay.
What time is your board meeting on the 10th and 11th?
It's the 11th and 12th.
Or the 11th and 12th? What time? All day, both days?
Not all day, probably won't start until between 10 and noon.
Okay,
We're starting a little bit early because we have the full task force the afternoon of the 12th, so we got to end early so we can get to Ignacio.
Yep, the Colorado River Drought Task Force is on
the
the
12th.
12th from 12 to 4.
Is there any way we could do in the morning on the 11th?
We could probably do it first thing.
And not, because I will be coming here from
Oh, okay.
Alamosa,
Mhm.
and so I'll be able to be here in person on the
I guess
11th.
it depends on location.
Yeah,
Yeah, what time what time did you say your board meeting is starting?
We haven't set it yet. We usually start about noon. We might start a little bit earlier, but depending, we can adjust as necessary.
Is that board meeting here?
Yeah, well, our board meeting's here.
Okay.
If we did 8:30 to 10:30, is that enough
I think that'll be fine.
transition time?
Yes.
It works for me. I can do either day.
Okay.
that would be lovely.
Letitia?
Yeah, that works for me.
That makes folks, you having to come to Durango again, which
Yeah,
I was suggesting that we have at least 2 public meetings, one in Ignacio, one in.
Yes.
Yep.
So if we can fit that in there.
yep.
So October 11th, we could meet here, and then the next 2 meetings, we could meet in Ignacio and Toyac.
Mhm.
Okay,
I appreciate that accommodating my board meeting.
so 8:30 to 10:30. Here in Durango. Okay. Would you like to host the Toyac meeting for the following meeting?
Yeah. October 24th? Is that too?
So October 24th. We'd be driving to Albuquerque for the Tech
Oh.
Tribes meeting on the 25th and the UCRC meeting on the 26th.
Would that
23rd?
Monday work better?
Yeah, the morning of Monday, if at all possible.
I could do Monday morning, yes.
Works for me.
I can, although I have some school responsibilities, so I'll need to start a bit later so I can get to Toyac if that's okay with you all.
Mhm.
What time would that?
I think 9:30 or 10 would be the most comfortable for me not to have this meet on the way.
Tended.
I think we need to do longer period if we're doing public comment.
Oh,
Yeah,
let's start at 10. Does that work?
Yeah, starting at 10. How much time should we add for the public comment?
An hour?
Yeah.
Just to make sure.
Yep.
And end early if there isn't as much. I'd rather err on the side of making sure we have time.
Okay, so 10 to 1.
mhm.
Okay, so for that October 23rd meeting, Letitia, if you can just send us the location, address and things like that.
Okay, yeah, I can do that.
Save that. So now we're into November.
Tuesday is November 7th, which is election day, but it doesn't matter.
Ignacio,
I don't think that day works for me. Sorry, I'm looking at the 9th is the Drought Task Force meeting in Glenwood Springs.
Is that for sure in Glenwood? I was thinking that one before that was, but you might be right.
It's just what I saw. I mean, it might change if they, like this next one changed because they couldn't find a meeting space.
Do you want me to jump in and answer that question?
Sure.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I don't want to do so uninvited. Yes, the meeting on November 9th has been confirmed to be in Glenwood. We have a space reserved. So, yes.
Thanks, Kelsey.
You're welcome.
Do we want to look at the week before?
Halloween. I've been to Ignacio on Halloween and it's fun. They do Halloween right.
Haunted house is cool.
Yeah.
Let's see. So I actually could do the 30th or 31st. I don't know if you guys want to travel again 1 week after the Toyac trip.
Works for me. The morning of the 31st probably doesn't, but anytime on the 30th or the afternoon of the 31st.
Celine?
Afternoon of the 30th works a little better than the morning,
Mhm.
and the 31st, I just need to work within some childcare hours.
Bring River with you.
Yeah. He's in real school now.
I know.
So would October 30th, 1 to 4
Mhm.
work?
Yep.
They might already have the haunted house set up, Celine.
Okay, so we've got October 23rd in Toyac, with public comment time. And then October 30th in Ignacio. Also with public comment time.
Oh,
So how many?
That week of the 13th, 14th is pretty rough.
Yeah, I'm out most of that week.
Yeah.
But I think the next task force meeting is not until December 7th, am I right?
Oh, good. So we have,
there's one on the 16th.
Oh, there is, I'm sorry.
But I think
Can I
Kelsey.
provide?
Yeah, go ahead, Kelsey.
The one on the 16th is a virtual meeting and it has been set as a if needed meeting because there was conversation at the last meeting to see if we could extend the meeting on November 9th to go all day. And so the 16th is a placeholder in case it's needed and also probably will remain virtual. And then the next meeting is not until December 7th.
Okay. So what do you all think about meeting the week of the 27th? Or
Mhm.
early week of the 4th?
I think
Either one works.
we should try the week of the 27th because if we have to have a report submitted by December 15th, we're gonna need time to do that.
Mhm.
And that week of the 27th works better for me than the following.
Yep.
Okay, so let's see which days. Actually, most of the days I have either morning and afternoon times, so. Far out, it's enough, it's
Yeah.
far out enough where,
I've got stuff Friday morning, but I could make something work most any day.
Maybe we try, could you do Wednesday that week?
Possible. Starting after 11 would be good, but if I need to, I can skip my morning meeting.
Makes no difference to me, time-wise.
Yeah.
want to make it an afternoon meeting then,
Sure.
Letitia?
Yeah, that works for me.
Okay.
Yep.
Let's see, do you want to do a 1:30 to 3:30? Or a 1 to 3,
Do we want to hold
more
the
time?
whole afternoon just because that's getting close to the wrap up?
If we're trying to,
Yeah, I'm fine with
12
that.
to 5, and we can narrow it from there.
Okay,
Here or
we'll find a host, but whatever works. Maybe a question more for Kelsey. I mean, if we really are drafting something, is it worth to try and have one of the facilitators, Kelsey, be here in person?
yes,
What was the date again?
29th.
November.
29th?
November.
Unfortunately, I will be out that week at a family reunion, but I can see if Siobhan can be there, if you would like that.
Please.
And sorry if I missed this, we are not going to meet again in September, or we are going to try to.
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Okay.
that sounds like everyone's out. The last week and a half. Okay. So this will be our only meeting in September, and then we have 2 meetings in October. 3. Oh, do we? Did it?
That's okay.
And 1 in November. Where did I just put that? The 29th, okay. Okay, and then do we need one more in December? Do we need maybe a tentative one if we need to wrap up a
It's something
report?
on the calendar.
Or we could do it virtual if it's focusing on finalizing a report.
I know this might sound strange, but I think a lot of us will be at Crua the
Yeah.
week of the 11th. So do we want to try to meet on the 8th? If it's virtually after the task force?
That works for me.
Yeah.
For the afternoon, but I could make any time work.
And that would have to be virtual, but yeah.
I'm sorry, so the 8th,
Mm-hmm.
I could meet in the afternoon.
All right.
You're good?
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
good.
Okay, so what we want to do 1 to 3?
Sure.
And call it virtual.
Yep.
Did we pick a location for the October 11th?
Hold on.
Yeah, we're back here
Okay,
because board meeting.
Yeah.
okay.
And then October 23rd is Toyac. October 30 is Ignacio. Should we make that Halloween costume required?
Oh, come on, Steve. I'm gonna be a Bill.
$5 bill.
Oh, a legislative bill. Do you remember that show? I'm just a bill sitting here on Capitol Hill. What song?
I don't. Don't think that one stuck with me. When I was at Navajo Nation Department of Justice, we would have Halloween costumes and a couple of attorneys did show up as Blue Book. Okay. Okay, so it looks like we have 5 meetings scheduled. Kelsey, we can send that to you later for you to post online. Is that all right?
Yes, I can definitely do that.
Okay. And then we'll work on the agendas and make sure we get them to you within a reasonable time frame for each of those meetings.
Great, sounds good.
Okay, thank you. That was actually much easier than I expected.
Usually that takes the most time.
It really does. And with everyone's schedules, I know. Meeting schedules are pretty intense. Okay, so moving on to our next agenda item, I just wanted to discuss the purpose of the subtask force at this first meeting and make sure that we're all on the same page. But also, work through any questions that we have or any issues that we have thought about before this meeting. And so I've got it's the legislation, Senate Bill 23-295 for this creation of the drought task force and the subtask force. And specifically 5A is the establishment of the subtask force to study tribal matters. So I'll just go ahead and read that first and then we can begin discussions. So 5A, the task force shall establish a subtask force to study tribal matters. The subtask force consists of representative of the Southern Ute Indian Tribe appointed pursuant to subsection 2A4 of the section. The representative of the Mountain Ute Tribe appointed pursuant to subsection 2A3 of the section. The executive director of the department or the director's designee. And 2 other members jointly appointed by the Southern Ute Indian Tribe, Mountain Ute Tribe, and the department. The purpose of the subtask force is to provide recommendations for state legislation that will provide for full tribal participation in the programs in a manner that recognizes the unique nature of tribal water rights and tribal water use, specifically in regard to forbearance and demand management opportunities. Provide for tribal participation in the programs in a manner that is voluntary, temporary, and compensated. And evaluate sources of revenue to appropriately compensate the Southern Ute Indian Tribe and the Mountain Ute Tribe for participation in the programs. So not too much there, but I think when I read that, it's following the same line as the Drought Task Force, but making sure that tribal matters are considered, that tribal water issues are considered and protected. And it, it doesn't say protected, but to me, that is what it means, because we want to make sure that whatever is recommended by the main Drought Task Force, and any recommendations, of course, that come from us, that tribal water rights are protected. And so I just wanted to put that out there in terms of what I read in that, and just ask that if anyone else has any comments on that, or if you have any comments on the legislation and what you read as the purpose for the sub-task force.
Just maybe a process question. Is it the assumption, yes or no, I don't know, that recommendations that come from this group then go to the big task force?
No.
For a corporate, they don't, okay, I just want to make sure we're all clear.
And the reason I say that is later in the legislation, the way I read, let's see, what is this? 5A, so 7B. And just paragraph 7 in general talks about submitting a report, but 7B says later than December 15th, the task force and sub-task force shall submit a final report. So I read that as two separate reports.
Okay.
The Drought Task Force submitting a report and the tribal sub-task force submitting a report, but I'm open to other suggestions.
Can I ask a couple questions that it might be helpful to get perspective on?
Mhm.
And I was thinking about the purpose of the sub-task force and thinking about what conservation programs have tribes participated in the past, what has worked, and then what hasn't worked. And with the focus on kind of the goal of protecting tribal water rights as a priority, obviously. I'd love to get information on that to make sure that we can build on what has worked. And find ways to address areas where it hasn't been an opportunity to participate by both the Ute Mountain Ute and the Southern Ute. And if you have any information on that, or if we want to, have that for discussion at another meeting, that's also okay. I know there was I'm thinking specifically about like SCPP, but I know there's other programs.
Yeah, and for the homework that the main task force is working on right now, I did send in policy brief 5 from the Water and Tribes Initiative. That's the most comprehensive written document that I have seen that goes over sort of how tribal nations throughout the Colorado River Basin have been able to participate and where they have run into barriers in participation. It is not focused in Colorado, but I provided it as a resource because I am not aware of any sort of single program that has been sort of stood up that's specific to tribal water. So I thought that was the most helpful resource for the main task force to look at. Of course, it's available and for the sub-task force as well.
And
Oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, we can definitely get into that. I mean, I can answer some of those questions now, but then I think historically I would need to talk to our water resources division to get a more concise explanation of past actions to see why certain programs hadn't worked in the past, but I mean, like the system conservation pilot program, that's definitely something I can answer in regards to Southern Ute, but I think historically I would need to talk to our water resources division to see what else has been out there and what, if anything, the tribe has been able to participate in.
Same.
Okay.
Same. Yeah.
But I think those are, those are definitely things that we would need to talk about to kind of narrow in what could work in the future and what hasn't been working. The System Conservation Pilot Program for Southern Ute, it did not work because, at least it's not a program that we could participate in, the tribe could participate in, because the tribe itself does not have an agricultural enterprise or a farming enterprise that does large amounts of farming and has water that it could conserve. All of the farming that is done at Southern Ute is done by individual tribal members. And I think it would just take some work to figure out how the tribe and those individual tribal members could work together to participate in that program. So it would take more work than just the last year that we had to apply for it. It would take putting some heads together and figuring out which tribal members may be interested, and then figuring out how to fit within that program.
Okay.
And as I understand it, the farm and ranch enterprise at U Mountain had their full water supply, so they didn't want to fallow their lands this year because they had that full water supply. And they would rather plant than fallow their lands.
And I think I had heard that also, Letitia, specifically because of the preceding years having been so short of water supply, that they really wanted to get back to producing and irrigating ag.
Yes. But besides that, as far as water conservation programs, I'm not very familiar with anything outside of SCPP. Yeah, so. And I know that that's part of the main task force as well, as learning about those programs, and so.
And so maybe, would that be something you'd be able to provide some information on, is what other kinds of programs are out there that would conserve water? And and then we would be able to say whether the tribes would be able to participate, or what the barriers are if we knew what those programs were.
Perfect.
And the U Mountain Ute tribe also has tribal ranches, and up in the Pinecrest area, they're looking at what's the correct in-stream flow. So those different kind of programs in ways that they could also provide, like help the tribe.
And I think what this, and this is somewhat on, I think we'll just put it on my to-do list in some way, in terms of what can we explore to help support and compensate the tribes when they want to voluntarily forbear or conserve water. And I keep thinking about going back to the goal of this task force and maybe the drought task force are, what are those challenges, whether they're legal, policy, or technical, and if there's ways that we can address the policy ones through this, and then maybe there needs to be some effort made on what a compensation framework would look like. And I think it really goes to somewhat of the root of the question of what do the tribes need and what do the tribes want in terms of the water, and is there development projects or what kind of support do we need and how can this sub task force be helpful? And I think it goes to what is needed by the tribes and looking at it, where is this a technical problem? Can we help solve that? Is this a legal issue that needs further analysis? And if there's something that we can address on the policy level right away. I think that's the charge we've been given by the policymakers, right? Is what needs to be created to help assist the tribes in some way, shape, or form. And I think it goes to the root question of what exactly do Mountain Ute and Southern Ute want and need?
So as I hear this discussion, I'm also thinking about the question that Steve asked about the interaction between the sub task force and the main task force. And over my career working in water in the Colorado River Basin, I've observed that when programs are put together to address drought and to facilitate water conservation, if tribes are not at the table, we see sort of some unintended consequences in the program development. So there's a sideboard or a parameter that there's a very good reason that it was put on the program, but it makes it unworkable for tribal participation. And so, you know, I think we need to think, and we may need to talk to the Drought Task Force about whether we're trying to build a tool or tools to recommend to the legislature that work for the state and also work for the tribal nations, or whether we need sort of a state-based program and a tribal program given the unique nature of the water rights. I think if we are looking at building programs that work in Colorado that also work for tribal nations, that is going to take more interaction with the task force as they consider what might work for the state. At this point, I think that either direction is workable. There's some reasons to think about a standalone tribal program given the unique nature of the rights. There's also an argument that we've seen problems in funding parity when tribal programs are not put together with the main program. So there are questions about funding. So just bringing this up, that if the main task force is considering what challenges, tools, and opportunities there might be in Colorado, and we're here just thinking about tribes, we could see a repetition of that disconnection that we've seen where we put together a state program that's really awesome, but has some unintended consequences or even contractual hurdles. And I've heard of projects failing just because the way the contracting wasn't done or was done was a fit for tribes. So just bringing that forward because I think it sort of begs the question of how much interaction we're going to have with the process with the main task force.
But it sounds like what you're talking about would be good information to put forward out from this group, right? If you're going to build a water conservation program, these are the things you have to consider. Is that?
I suspect that it would be helpful for the main task force to better understand sort of where those pinch points have been in the past and where some careful program design might alleviate pressures that have sort of hindered tribal participation in the past. But I don't know because I'm not on the main task force. I'm just an alternate.
Yeah, I think but I think that Steve, Letitia, myself being on the main task force, will be able to bring some of these conversations to the main drought task force. And then also the tribal issues will be represented by the tribes. And so I think there will be interaction there. But if there is a specific issue or piece of information that this task force very specifically wants to bring to the main task force, then of course we can do that. And maybe that's something at the end of each meeting we should talk about.
What should go forward?
Yeah, what we can bring and what we want to make sure that the main task force is learning from our meetings and from what information we've been discussing.
And I think I would hope at the end of this meeting, we say what we'd like the main task force to be aware of is that if a program's built, these unintended consequences, we want to bring those to the task force that we know of already. And also hold space for kind of that other option that you said, where we may need dual programs, that maybe there's a program that's created that Ute, Mountain Ute and Southern Ute can participate in. But we may also want something else specifically for the tribes because of their unique water rights. And maybe that's where the support and compensation for the tribes, if they want to voluntarily forbear or conserve water, maybe there's a unique tribal program. And maybe that's where there's some compensation framework or ideas. And I know there's broader discussions on a basin-wide level of that, or at least on the upper basin level of how do we do that, and making sure we don't have unintended consequences for other tribes in the upper basin too. Or there may be an opportunity to lead in terms of a Colorado framework.
So I had, Letitia and I had put together a PowerPoint, a brief PowerPoint that kind of puts together some main points about the Colorado Ute settlement, to give everyone that basic framework to start with. And then also has some challenges listed in it for the tribes of things that we are seeing as we work through the settlement, and as the tribes are trying to develop their water. And so I know most of us here have that information, but I wanted to make sure we all had that same basis, and also for people who are watching, and because we will have public comments, and so we want to make sure that everyone has that information as well. So would you guys mind if we go through that PowerPoint, and then we can come up with, and then we can continue the discussion?
Please, yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, should I send that to you?
Or
Either that, or if you want to go in the meeting, you can present it off your computer.
Okay. Because I think, some of these things that we're talking about now, we can address through the PowerPoint in terms of what part of the settlement the tribes are having issues with, and how that ties into drought issues and development issues, and even the challenges of working with conservation programs. And so I think it would be a good jumping off point. Let me get onto the Zoom. I didn't do that at the beginning.
if it's easier for you to send it to one of us, we can put it up there, but it's up to you.
Okay, I'm connected.
Oh, great. There we go. Then I'll promote you to a panelist, and then you should be able to screen share.
Okay. Currently it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
I'll upgrade you one more and it'll allow you.
I'm trying to figure out how to get to the main, just to show, there we go. Okay, so I think hopefully everyone knows that Southern Ute and Ute Mountain Ute are the original inhabitants of the state of Colorado, and historically the two tribes were also occupying part of the surrounding states, so Utah, Wyoming, Nevada, northern New Mexico, and northern Arizona. We've got 3 maps here. The first is the historical homelands and shows kind of the whole area where the two tribes had lived in and hunted and gathered. And then we have our 1868 treaty, which then shows what those original reservations were established. 1873 shows the shrinking of the reservations. And then today, here is a map of Southern Ute Indian Reservation, which is now located in Southwest Colorado. Ute Mountain Ute Tribes Reservation, which is in Southwest Colorado as well, and then dips down into New Mexico and over into Utah a little bit. So tribes, as it's already been mentioned today in the discussion, tribes do have unique water rights. They are very different from a regular water user's water rights, and they are referred to as federal Indian reserved water rights. They are also known as Winters rights. This comes from the court case Winters v. United States. The U.S. Supreme Court held that a right to water was impliedly reserved in the agreement establishing the reservation. And so that usually gives the priority date for tribes. With Southern Ute, the reservation was created in 1868. And so that is the priority date for the majority of the tribe's water rights.
1868.
Yeah.
Yukon.
And that's because when the reservation lands were set aside for tribes, those water rights were reserved to carry out the purpose for which the lands were set aside. And those water rights, federal reserved Indian water rights, cannot be lost through abandonment or forfeiture due to non-use. And so that's a pretty big key component of federal Indian reserved water rights. And those water rights, when tribes settle their water rights, those water rights are satisfied out of the unappropriated water that was available when the lands were taken into trust. So that's all, those are all the those are the takeaways from that case, but how they apply today, again, is that sets the priority date for each of the tribes, and both Southern Ute and Ute Indian or Ute Mountain have 1868 priority date for a majority of the water rights. Of course, with settlements, some of those dates can change if the tribe agrees to so the U.S. will negotiate, then the state and the U.S. will negotiate maybe a different date for in exchange for funding for a project and for the project itself. And so there are some water rights that Southern Ute did negotiate a different priority date in exchange for some funding. And so, as I said, the majority of the priority dates for the tribe are 1868, but some of the rivers going through Southern Ute have a slightly later priority date. And I think the same holds for Ute Mountain Ute tribe.
Yes, the Yukon Ute tribe did have their water rights subordinated due to the Dolores project, and I think it was later, the late 70s, 78, I believe, 80s.
And so I also included Winans rights, and this is just, this is another court case, United States v. Winans, 1905, where the U.S. Supreme Court held that the treaty was not a grant of rights to the Indians, but a grant of rights from them, a reservation of those not granted. And I always like to include this for public education, because what I hear a lot in conversations are that the US gave you this and the US and the state gave you this, or we gave you this, and really it was negotiations between tribes and the United States, and it was a reservation from the tribes of what they had before, already had as sovereign nations. And so this is just really the basis, one of the basis of the tribe's sovereignty and water rights that show that tribes withheld those waters that they already had use of and were using. And so I am going to give some basics of the Southern Ute Indian Tribe and Ute Mountain Ute Tribe's water rights, or water settlement, sorry. So there was a 1986 settlement agreement, and then the 1988 Colorado Ute Indian Water Rights Settlement Act recognized tribal water rights for all surface streams and tributary groundwater on both reservations. It affirmed that settlement agreement, authorized the Animas La Plata project as part of that settlement, and as well as the Dolores project. And it also satisfied the congressional cost sharing requirement for the ALP project. So we've got the Animas La Plata project, which is now currently known as Lake Nighthorse. That was originally authorized in 1968. The EIS was completed in 1980. And that original settlement actually authorized the water use for municipal, industrial, and irrigation use for the tribes. But there were significant environmental concerns. And so that ended up with an amendment to the settlement, but those concerns were related to the irrigation component. So after several negotiations and discussions, there were actually, and let me point out that those settlement act amendments only applied to the Animas and La Plata rivers. So all of the other rivers and groundwater that were settled within the original settlement still stand. But this settlement act amendment required court approval to change the settlement. They're only in the legislation, so they're not in the settlement agreement. And the settlement act amendment basically eliminated the irrigation components. So neither of the tribes can use this water for irrigation. And that was a big change for the tribes, because I think both tribes wanted to use water for irrigation. In exchange for eliminating that component, a $40 million tribal resource fund was created with the requirement that $30 million be spent in partnership with surrounding communities. And so any project that the tribes use that money for has to be in partnership with some water development with their partnering communities. And so that, I think Southern Ute has, and I'm only speaking for Southern Ute because I'm not sure what Ute Mountain has been using their portion of their resource fund for, but Southern Ute has been making headway in working with local communities and working on development projects. So here's a slide with the challenges for the tribes related to the ALP project. The major challenge is the fact that the tribes are required to pay operation and maintenance fees once they begin using the water from the ALP project.
Lisa, can I ask one question about that
Yes.
for my information? If you start doing it and they're required to pay an O&M, are you paying O&M just on how much you use, or you're a total part of Lake Nighthorse?
So that's something I've been looking into. The Southern Utes repayment contract. So it's actually not, I haven't seen it in the settlement agreement, but in the repayment contract, it states that it is for the portion that they are using.
But it's forever.
But then it's forever. So if
Right.
the lease is for 10 years, and then it ends and no one else leases that water, the tribe has to continue paying O&M for that portion of water.
But it's just that portion.
Yep. So, it really makes the tribe think about whether there is a project that is cost effective or profitable enough to pay for the lease, to make sure that the O&M is included in there, because the tribe doesn't want to be stuck with paying more than they're bringing in for this water. That is really one of the biggest challenges. And so
It almost seems like it's creating a space where it's cost prohibitive to do it. And I do feel like this is something that would be helpful to have addressed. I've said this publicly and to the federal government. I think this should be of highest priority to address, because I think it is actually what's holding back or one of the things that's holding back.
yeah, and so this water in the Lake Ninth Horse, at least for the tribes, is for municipal and industrial use. And so it doesn't make sense, at least right now, to develop that water for housing or for something that's going to be low cost like that, where the tribe would have to pay a lot of money for O&M to use it for that. So and I can turn it over to Letitia to discuss Ute Mountain's challenges with that as well.
And yeah, Ute Mountain has not been able to negotiate a repayment contract with the Bureau of Reclamation because of that the O&M cost. So even even if we were to come up with something here that works for a tribe, Ute Mountain would still be stuck until we can negotiate something that is favorable to us.
So, yeah, so that's an additional hurdle for Ute Mountain, is that they don't have the repayment contract in place. So in the sense of wanting to develop the water, they have one more hurdle than Southern Ute does in getting to that space.
So just to clarify again, from my perspective, so you have an agreement with Reclamation?
Southern Ute does, yes.
Yes,
Mhm.
on the repayment on Ute Mountain. Ute has no repayment contract written out at all?
No, and the reason being is what they learned from the 2021 Dolores project, where they had when they were shorted water like everybody else, but they had to still pay that O&M fee. I don't know the correct amount right now, but it was a huge amount, and they didn't even receive that water, making them want to the tribe make sure that they get this one at ALP right.
So we have a question or comment.
Yeah, and the sticking point on the Ute negotiations, Peter is here, he's been more directly involved. It's this whole temporary.
Can you say your name just so
Oh,
everyone?
yeah, my name is Mike Preston. I'm the alternate to Letitia. And so the sticking point is really the fact that once you take an increment of water, you're on the O&M charges would apply to that increment of water, as your question before. But then once you take that increment of water, you're stuck with the O&M charges forever. And so if there was an opportunity to do something for 10 years or some sort of short-term period, the risk is very high that when that use ends, that the tribe would end up paying O&M charges on basically when they don't really have a revenue source to meet those charges.
I'm not sure this needs to be said, but I'm going to say it. For me, this is really pointing out that if we're going to figure out a program that works for Colorado's tribes to voluntarily participate, given the nature of the settlement and how much water is in federal storage project contracts, we're going to have to figure out a way for the tribal nations to potentially participate with that water, and that may take some additional steps with the Bureau of Reclamation or the Department of Interior.
I 100% agree, and I keep going back to kind of our mission and goal with this subtask force and figure out what can the state do to help with that. And I think that's where, when we're talking about maybe policy initiatives or other initiatives, where can the state play a role? Is there potential legislative help that could occur? And because I think you're absolutely right, Celine, this has to be addressed. And the call out on the O&M, this isn't new.
No, it's not. I think both tribes have been very vocal about this, but it is one of the largest hurdles to using their settlement water. The other hurdle to using the settlement water is funding. So the tribe is working, at least Southern U, sorry, I don't mean to speak for U Mountain, but Southern U has a water use options team, and they are working to develop options, plans on using the water that they have. And one of the big challenges, once those decisions are made as to what kinds of development they want to do, it will be funding to build that infrastructure. For Southern Ute, the water can be released from Lake Nighthorse into the river, but then there would need to be infrastructure built to pull that water out and access the water for whatever plans there are. I think Ute Mountain is in a different scenario, and I don't if you want to address that, Letitia.
So initially, with funding, what I want to bring up is that, the ALP was supposed to bring water to the dry site, La Plata, and then possibly to Toyot. And, that part of the original settlement was cut out. So, the funding right now, it's too much for even to get water to the other side to the Four Corners. So that's what I want to say about that.
So it's almost like the fund that it's cost prohibitive, that you would do this if it weren't for the cost piece, and that is the biggest issue rather than the technical hurdle of trying to figure out what a project would look like. Is the funding piece probably the biggest, or is it the technical?
Maybe the technical first.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, this may be an area where we could give suggestion to the larger group and to the legislature in terms of potential support opportunities. From looking at the funding piece of it, I think it's important that we utilize the situation that we're in right now and recognize that there are some funding opportunities, but we have to be expedient on potential access of these federal funds that could come up. So I think that we may want to prioritize some of the funding piece that could help with the technical. I think there's only with the IRA and the bipartisan infrastructure law funds, there's a window of opportunity, and if we don't have those somewhat earmarked of what they should be spent on, we may lose the capability of that. So I think I would urge us to look as the two Colorado Ute tribes and the state and the partners to look and say, okay, what kind of projects could we propose to utilize those funds.
Yeah, and to the extent possible, maybe not this meeting, next meeting. I would be really interested in hearing from both tribes about barring all these hurdles. What would you really like to use your water for? What's your preference? What's your needs? What's your wants?
And I just want to underscore that for both tribal nations and some of the rural communities that have partnered with tribes, we do not have universal access to clean water. We have rural and tribal residents here that don't have clean piped water to their homes. And as we think about how Colorado becomes more resilient to drought, I would like us to really think about a recommendation in that space. So how can our rural and tribal communities become more resilient to drought, in part by gaining access to clean and safe drinking water, which is not universal in the Southwestern district right now for tribal or rural communities.
Good point.
Yeah, those are good questions and comments. I think that's something I can work on with our team and kind of get some answers to, and also just thinking about to the point of what the tribes would really want to do if there were no challenges in place and no
Dream big.
hurdles. But also to the point of access to clean piped water. I know Southern Ute does have households that don't have clean piped water. But I would need to speak to like the utilities division to see. I think which households those are and what those hurdles are. My understanding is that one of the biggest hurdles for that specific issue is the checkerboard nature of Southern Ute lands, and so having fee lands mixed in amongst the trust land, state lands. And so I think that's the biggest issue, is having to figure out how to get pipes across and get easements and pipes across all of these different jurisdictions. And whether that's too expensive for one household and whether it's workable. And so those are specific questions that I would need to ask our utilities department. And I'm not sure if you have any comments on those two issues.
Clean water, as far as the community of Toya, I know they're looking at redoing their whole community lines. That's one project they're looking at doing, so yeah.
And so for Southern Ute, I just wanted to give a little background on the Pine River Indian Irrigation Project. This is a BIA constructed project for Southern Ute, and it's for all of the tribal irrigators. It was built in the late 1800s through the early 1900s. And it was built piecemeal. So it's not one large continuous project. It was built slowly as irrigators needed the water, but it does currently deliver irrigation water to Southern Ute tribal members and non-Indians. It also delivers water to the town of Ignacio. Right now, the project is in extreme disrepair. So there are approximately 175 miles of canals with an estimated 15% that is in good condition right now. So no major repairs have been made since the 1960s, and many of the structures for the PRIP are failing due to erosion and poor maintenance. And so that erosion has created miles of incised canals and ditches where the head gates are elevated, and so it no longer allows for diversion to occur. There are pipelines that, like this picture here, show that are collapsing or about to collapse. And once they do that, the water will not be deliverable to a large portion of both non-Indian and tribal irrigators. And so this is a project that Southern Ute is focused on right now because it has been putting its own money into fixing portions, the worst portions of this project, but it is a BIA project. In the tribe's view, the US should be providing enough money to repair this project, and it has not done so. And so the water users pay for 100% of the project's O&M annual assessments, but those fees are not sufficient to cover the amount of repair work that is needed. They're also too low to address the deferred maintenance costs, and they're too high for individual tribal members, so the tribe also assists with those costs. So that's another cost that the tribe has taken on. And so the current concerns for this project is that there is a large amount of the irrigable acreage that's not being irrigated due to the state of the project. The fact that the largest canal has been breached multiple times in the last few years, which results in a loss of that water. And then the roads used for operation and maintenance are not being maintained. And so that makes access to the structures almost impossible.
At least off the top of your head, do you know sort of what the total project acreage is and what's being irrigated currently or can be irrigated?
You know, I'd have to find that out. Yeah. I want to say 12,000 acres, but I'd have to find out specifically.
Thanks.
Yep. You know, and so the tribal irrigators want to use this water. Obviously, the non-Indians want to use the water. I think that if the project was actually repaired to the point of using that water in a way that there was not so much loss, I mean, I think it would be better for the system and for how much that water is being used in a reasonable way, so that there's not so much loss, I think. Because you see this water is just pouring out.
So Lisa, I want to make sure I heard that right. Would it be fair to say that this project might be something that this sub-task force looks at in the sort of tribal ag space? Like, what are the opportunities in program design to look at addressing some very significant maintenance issues within a large project and providing drought resilience for this part of this? Is that sort of fair that this would be
Yes.
something good to look at?
Mhm. Yeah, if there's a way we can, I mean, our water resources is constantly searching for funding that would fit this project. A lot of reclamation's funding doesn't fit because it is a BIA project. And so this is why the tribe has been putting its own money into certain areas so that it doesn't completely fail. But I think that the tribe has been having difficulty finding funding that would fit this specific project. And to be fair, there is the WIN Act, which provides funding for Indian irrigation projects across the West. There are, I believe, 16 or 18 Indian irrigation projects, but it's my understanding that the WIN Act is not fully, the funds for that are not fully appropriated. So only a certain amount is being appropriated, and it's not enough for all of the projects. And I will turn this over to Letitia.
The Dolores project, so that it was constructed in 1988. The project brought drinking water to the Ute Mountain Ute members for the first time. The project really allowed the tribe to be economically viable. Irrigation is delivered to the farm and ranch to grow corn and feed for the bow and arrow herd. And it also allowed drinking water to the tribal casino and hotel. Currently, the enterprises from the project comprise 20% of the tribal population. So in a nutshell, the Dolores project really provides the, the economic part of Toyoak, and it wouldn't be what it is right now. Because as in the past, water was trucked to the community. So really this Colorado Indian settlement helped the tribe economically. Yes.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Do you know what percentage of tribal members have drinking water now?
I'm not sure of that correct. I'm not sure the percentage, but I'm pretty sure the whole town of Toyoak has access to drinking water. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's some outlying areas that, where development has sprawled out, where the water has not reached, but most of the population is in the community of Toyoak, and they have access to clean drinking water.
There are only 2 or 3 homes that are problematic.
So some challenges with the Dolores project was in 2021 when everyone had a, bad water supply. The farm and ranch only received 10% of their whole their normal supply, and then in 2022 only 40% of their normal supply. And in 2021, the tribe had to disc and spray 6,000 acres of fallow land at a cost of $2 million, with almost no crop income to replant the farm when a full supply became available in 2023. During that time, they were negotiating a contract with the reclamation to get some relief for the tribe, for the farm and ranch.
Letitia, do you know what percentage of farm and ranch you got replanted this year?
They were able to replant the whole farm, 7,700 acres.
Yeah, I think there's still about 1,000 acres fallowed. I mean, once they had the water, the full water supply, they've been out there planting 7 days a week, all long days and everything. And so there's about 1,000 acres that will, if the water supply is there, the additional 1,000 acres be put back into production next water season.
Was there a yield reduction because of the years of fallow? Was there any additional loss of income due to some of the issues related to the previous drought years?
So one of the things that so the reclamation did come up with $2 million to offset the disc spray and discing cost, and that's what allowed the farm to be replanted. And part of that arrangement is that we're monitoring the very question you're asking, Becky, very carefully. So far, the fallow lands, I mean, because if they had not been sprayed and disked, we saw some fields that were just totally overtaken that we never get back in production. But the fields that were replanted seem to be responding very well. There doesn't seem to be any, any loss of yield in those areas that were fallowed. So far it's encouraging that if the fallowed acres are treated properly, that they can be put back into full production pretty expeditiously once the water's there.
So I'm about to ask a leading question that I think I know the answer to, but I think it's important to emphasize. When the Bureau helped pay for the disc and spray of 6,000 acres of fallowed land of $2 million, that was the cost to do that, right? There wasn't money made because those lands were fallowed. That was the cost to upkeep the lands to be able to plant them again at some point, right? So
that's correct. Yeah.
okay, I think that's an important thing to emphasize because that was a cost of, to maintain those lands. There wasn't a significant income. It wasn't like a payment for the lack of water.
Well, and it's even more than that. There was, one of the things that had happened is that tribe wasn't able to make their O&M, pay their O&M project because, essentially they didn't have the revenue to do it.
Okay.
And so they had to use part of the $2 million to pay off their O&M. So 800,000 of it actually went into O&M payments. So they had to eat part of the cost. But yeah, the $2 million is our real cost.
Okay, that I think we need to highlight that as much as we possibly can, in terms of emphasizing how it works up here.
So let me interrupt for just a quick second. Letitia has to leave. And so we are going to sub in her alternate, Mike Preston. And safe travels.
Yeah.
Thank you, Letitia.
You said. Yeah, okay, yeah, let's do that.
Can I ask a follow-up question? About sort of the progression over those really, really awful years to this year. What has it been like in the sort of employee space for the farm and ranch for families who were had tribal members who were laid off? Are they back working? How has that progressed this?
It's a really good question. So they basically had to cut the labor force in half. And having, trained farm workers, that was very painful to do. And so there was also a corn mill that's a part of the farm and ranch operation, and same thing happened. In other words, the employment, they went down to one shift. The employment was cut in half in the corn mill because they couldn't produce enough corn for full supply. So about half of the employees were laid off. With this year, with the water supply returning, probably about a quarter, half of employees have been brought back. And so the employment is being rebuilt, and we're obviously looking really carefully at the water supply next year, hoping that, with full production, the employment, we should be able to try and grow the employment back. There's also a cow herd, and there are employees associated with the bow and arrow brand cow herd, and that was reduced from 650 head down to 500. They're going to try to build the herd back. So, but that's a really good question. I mean, the employment hit pretty hard. The other thing that really helped, I mean, the farm and ranch was able to apply for all the farm, programs that everybody else is eligible for. And Simon has a really good reputation for making good use of that money.
Mm-hmm.
And so that helped. The other thing that was that made a difference is I sort of lost the thread of that. But at any rate, that it was a pretty good hit on the kind of unemployment. Oh yeah, what I was going to mention, I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem.
So one of the other things that, I mean, we've got extensive infrastructure trying to make investments. I mean, these pivots are 20 to 30 years old. And so the Farm and Ranch have been working with NRCS. They also have a micro hydro project down there. So partly how they were able to retain employees in the off season to even keep it at 50% was that these are all skilled people. They've got welders. I mean, they know how to work the entire system. So they were doing pivot installations. They were installing micro hydro units and doing other, and right now we just applied for 25 million through RCPP to continue with pivot replacements, telemetry, a lot of other related benefits. So we hope to really kind of build on that program. But that's the other thing, is being able to really having the infrastructure funding helped with the employment problem as well. And long term, the viability of the farm is really about getting that infrastructure. It's already a pretty efficient project, but really improving those efficiencies to the max.
And then we just had one more slide here, effects of the drought. And I think this applies to everyone in the state, right? It's reduction in snowpack and runoff, water quality due to that decreased snowpack and runoff. Specifically with Southern Ute, there has been less water for irrigation season. Of course, this year was fantastic this past year, but in previous years, there's been less water for irrigation season. And so specifically on some of the smaller rivers like the Florida, irrigators are not getting a full irrigation season and longer fire seasons. But that is our PowerPoint and it's 10:10, and I just want to make sure that we have time for any comments on the PowerPoint or any final questions.
Just that I hope you'll make that PowerPoint available.
Yes, I will do that. I'll send it to all of the subtask force members and I will provide it to our facilitators to put it on the website.
Great, thanks.
And I just want us to be aware that this highlights it even more in the importance of the settlements and making sure that we don't do anything that creates risks to the settlements. I think that's something that I think is incredibly important.
And just to add kind of an issue that's directly related to what you're saying, when we first realized that, or that the farm wasn't going to be able to make the O&M payments, there's a provision in the settlement called 6A, or item 6A, which really says that if the tribe don't have adequate revenue to pay the O&M charges, reclamation will pick those charges up. Unfortunately, the wording is gross income. And so that's kind of a real difficulty, because if you have, obviously, especially with a tribal operation, you don't really have, it's not like you have a line of credit with the bank. I mean, you got to have cash to plant your crop. And so the idea that the reclamation was going to take the money off the top when, they're struggling with all these other challenges and everything, that there was a pretty good, we tried to make that case. That reclamation didn't really step up to it. And in fact, the $2 million that we received in Drought, for the cost of fallowing was sort of a trade-off. In other words, they were saying, well, we're not going to honor that provision, but we'll make resources to you available by other means. And if you look at 6A, if it were net income rather than gross income, then provisions, then it would really have an effect. And it could even be not only beneficial on the Dolores project, it could work on the ALP in the sense of the tribes engage in some water use or water lease or something. And then it's covering the O&M cost. And if you hit a point where that's not happening, then it could, that provision could be useful. So Peter hasn't given up on that. We're going to continue to push for the recognition of 6A. It's the only settlement in the country that has it. That's why they're dug in. And it was, that's because the Colorado Ute Indian Water Rights Settlement was really one of the first water rights settlements in the country. So we were able to get that provision in. It was not included, as I understand, in any of the other settlements, but it's part of the settlement and we want it to be honored, and it could make a huge difference. I guess the other thing I would say is we'd like to we're contemplating a very simple piece of legislation that would turn the word gross to net. I mean, if that one word would make provision 6A really effective, assuming that reclamation would honor it when it.
You say you're contemplating it, but you haven't brought it forward to anybody yet. Just curious.
Yeah, I mean, it's all, I mean, there's a Water Resources Committee, that's the recommendation of the committee, but I think, yeah, we're gonna work with our legislator. We're not trying to make a big hoopla about it. Because we're not trying to open the settlement up or anything. We're just trying to get that one word changed. And so that we're playing it pretty low key, to tell you the truth, Steve.
Understand.
But we may call on people for support when the time is right. So appreciate your question.
So I think the purpose of that PowerPoint was just to provide that overview and to provide the group the challenges that the tribes are facing. I mean, I'm sure there are more, but those have been really, at least for Southern Ute, have been the big ticket items that are causing the most challenges for the tribe to develop its water, its settlement water. And so, there are other challenges associated with the settlement. I think that will come out in future discussions as we delve deeper into the issues. But that was just kind of wanting to provide that basic framework for everybody. And so I think the next item on the agenda, to draft the next agenda together, we should move on to that because I think it is right now 10:15. And we are scheduled to end at 10:30. If we want to just throw out some issues that we want to address, we can put that on there and I'll draft an agenda to send out to everyone. Yep, go ahead, Mike.
One thing that, so there is an opportunity because of the infrastructure money that's available. There's an opportunity for the tribes to really make some gains. We're going to do substantial work on the Dolores project. One of the challenges that presents is our matching requirements. You've got, most of these funding sources require, some of them require pretty substantial match. That's going to be obviously very hard for the tribes to come up with. And so, I mean, one solution, may be some waiver on those match requirements, and some of the Native American Affairs programs actually accomplish that. The other thing is the relationship with the state of Colorado, CWCB. There may be, I think that the state funding could be very vital in leveraging the availability of federal funds. So that would be a point of discussion, is really kind of the potential role of the state in accessing the federal funding that's becoming available to everybody and specifically to the tribes.
So the agenda item would be a discussion on whether we can figure out waiver of match requirements and whether the state would be able to assist with funding.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
Help leverage the federal funding.
I guess I would bring up what I said earlier, sort of a big picture scenario from both tribal nations about what they would love to be able to do with their water. Minus all the hurdles and things, but just so we understand what the goals are.
Okay.
I think additional discussion on the question that Becky asked about sort of what have we tried in the past that didn't work? What do we know about, existing issues and hurdles that we could then potentially brief the main task force on or develop our recommendations out of.
Celine, earlier you mentioned policy brief number 5 from Water Tribes.
Happy to provide that.
That'd be good.
Kelsey, can I rely on you? I sent it to the facilitators on Sunday, I think.
Yes, I can be in touch with you, Celine, and then I can get that posted to the website.
Thank you.
By the way, I just wanted to mention that Letitia, the reason she headed out is she's testifying in front of the Water Resources Committee this afternoon. Probably using the same PowerPoint. I mean, they're trying to get oriented. And again, all the interest on the part of the state is very much appreciated and very much directly related to what Becky has done as far as setting that tone. So they're what you just got, the water resources, well, it's called Water and Ag, I think, interim committee is going to hear this afternoon.
Yep.
Celine, earlier you mentioned tribal access to clean water. Should we put that on the agenda for next time?
Yeah.
I will throw out something. We can decide whether it's next agenda or a future agenda. I would be very interested in hearing from tribes what is working and what is not working as far as cash flow between the state and the tribes. I think it's really relevant to sort of, if we had funding that was appropriated by the legislature or funding that was coming in through federal sources, what's working well in getting funding to tribal nations and what isn't, because that could affect recommendations on both sort of the appropriation process and how that would flow to the nations.
That's a really good issue. I mean, we just went through we're participating in the CWCB capacity building technical assistance grant program. Really well into, good program structure. We got hung up in the state controller's office. We just got a contract. It was approved by the board, months and months ago. We just got a contract. And so hopefully, we've cleared that hurdle and it won't come up. And again, the question was, tribal eligibility. They didn't know how to fit tribes into the way that they evaluate these things. So it's a really important issue.
Yeah, and I think for me, I'd have a question, is there a legislative fix or is this at a different level within the state for that to be appropriately addressed?
I'm looking for my list. I might just have to send out some issues to you all. In the future as we're putting the draft agenda together.
And sorry, I have one more and then I'll stop.
Do we need to expand the next meeting?
No, this really might be a question for Kelsey. Our next meeting is the day before the main task force meeting. And if we could get some clarity on whether those of us who are not members of the main task force, if we're needed in Ignatia that day or not, and sort of what we might do, that would be helpful for my schedule. I have some limits that day.
So to clarify, Celine, is the question whether you can attend the meeting, or just do you mind clarifying the question?
What time might be needed of sub task force members on the 12th, if anything?
That is kind of up to you. I mean, we do not have an agenda for that meeting other than the topic that will be covered, which I believe is following up on questions and comments about intrastate and interstate tools. So we can definitely, there will be time in the agenda for tribal matters. It can be at the beginning, and the meeting is currently scheduled from 12 to 4 with public comment at the beginning.
Okay. I will only be available for about the first half of the meeting. If we want sub-task force members there, I'm happy to come. I'm also flexible either way.
I will make a note of that in setting the agenda. Thanks, Celine.
Is that something we want to do, is provide a report to the main drought task force on our discussions
Yeah.
at each of the drought task force meetings?
Mhm.
Okay, so Kelsey, would we be able to add that to the agenda for the next,
Absolutely.
for each of those meetings? Just providing some time for us to give a report on what we've discussed if the drought task force members were not able to listen in.
Absolutely. I'll add that also to we have a section for updates for this coming meeting on Thursday. And so I will add that to the agenda.
I don't know if this is an agenda item for the next meeting, but one of the things, and it got some discussion earlier, is the tribe being able to be compensated for unused water. In other words, all the water that the tribes are not able to access, and ALP is a good example, are in the river, but the tribes are not receiving any compensation for that water. And then specifically with regard to the ALP, if there are possibilities of providing some ALP water as to contribute to the system, is there a way to do that without quote unquote triggering use? Because as we discussed earlier, once you trigger use on, let's say that the tribes are going to contribute a substantial amount of their allocation. If they were, this would be short term, and so it's a clear example of where that use trigger could create a real problem. So if these conservation measures can be considered as not triggering use, that would really help, certainly with the Animus La Plata project, being able to contribute, or the tribe being able to get some compensation.
That's definitely something we would want to discuss. I think we would need to set aside a larger portion of time to provide background on that issue and then go into those legal challenges and all of that, but that's a good agenda item. So maybe what I can do is draft 1 to 3 agendas, and we can work on putting issues in all of them, appropriate amount of time, and what order we want to talk about all of these issues. I can work on putting together at least more than one draft agenda to cover all of these issues, because I think some of them will require a large amount of time to discuss.
Thank you for taking the lead on that.
Yeah.
Okay. That'll be my to-do in the upcoming weeks. Oh, and then, and our next 2 meetings we'll have public comment periods as well, so make sure to add that into the agenda.
Thinking back to Kelsey's question about facilitation, I think if we have large attendance at the on-reservation meetings, having some facilitation help with public comment, whether it's from Kelsey or from tribal staff, might help, just to make sure we have an orderly and fair way to take public comment.
Mhm. No, I agree.
We can help provide that, yes.
Great.
And I guess I'll ask, do we need to think about any translation assistance, which I think might require working with the nations?
Yeah, actually, I think it would be really helpful for the facilitators to provide that service of note taking for the meetings with the specifically with the public comments.
Yeah, I was also thinking if we have any youth speakers that need translation, is that something that we need to think about at the meetings?
I will check on that for Southern Ute.
Yeah, it's never, I mean, if everything in Toyac is televised, there's a public channel that covers all the meetings and everything. And so there isn't, translation has never been a part of that process. So it's not something that's even part of kind of the governmental process. So it may be more cumbersome than it's worth, but we can check that out.
Yeah.
We have a question from Peter Ortego.
To add to that, the commenters may be speaking in Ute. I think that might be the point. Not so much translation for those who are listening, but translation for those who are listening who don't know Ute. May want a translator to translate for the purpose of the record.
Good point.
If appropriate, I would really defer to our tribal representatives to tell us what is going to be appropriate when we're on the reservation and hearing from tribal members and community members.
And that having somebody, I mean, Peter's making a really good point, having somebody available to translate comments, incoming comments. That pretty much would be focused on that public input part of the meeting. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily need a translator there for the entire meeting, but for the public comment part of it, where you're going to have possibly people weighing in and you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I'll follow up with within Southern Ute. Okay, I think we are finished for today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for coming and being here in person. We really appreciate it, Becky, for coming all the way down here. And we look forward to our next meeting, and we've got a lot of work to do, so.
Yes, we do.
I will try to get this the draft agendas out as soon as I can.
Very well run meeting.
Yes,
Appreciate that.
incredibly efficient and on point.